The message came from deep space on a Tuesday morning. Commander Sarah Chen was drinking her coffee when the communication array lit up like a Christmas tree. The signal was strong, clear, and definitely not human. "Ma'am, you need to see this, Kialis," said Lieutenant Morrison, his face pale as he stared at the translation matrix. "It's from something called the Galactic Defense Coalition." Sarah set down her cup and walked to the main display. The hologram showed star maps she had never seen before, with red zones spreading like cancer across multiple systems. The voice that followed was artificial, translated through their computers, but the desperation was real. "People of Earth," the message began, "we are the Galactic Defense Coalition. We have watched your species from afar and know of your warrior traditions. We need your help." The hologram shifted to show massive dark shapes moving between the stars. They looked wrong somehow, like shadows that had learned to hate. "The Void Swarm has consumed 17 of our worlds. Our armies cannot stop them. Nothing we do works. We have studied your military history. Your people know war better than any species we have encountered." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The aliens had been watching Earth, studying human warfare. They thought they knew what humanity could do in battle. "We offer full membership in the Galactic Coalition in exchange for military assistance. Send us your soldiers. Send us your armies. Help us stop this threat before it reaches your world too." The message ended with coordinates and a countdown timer. They had 3 days to respond. Within hours, every major government on Earth was in emergency session. The president called Sarah directly, his voice tight with stress. "What do you think, Commander? Can we trust them?" Sarah looked at the data again. The technology required to send this message across interstellar space was beyond anything Earth possessed. If these aliens wanted to hurt humanity, they probably could have done it already. "I think they're telling the truth, sir. And I think they're desperate." "What about this Void Swarm? Any idea what we're dealing with?" Sarah pulled up the tactical analysis her team had prepared. "From what we can see in their data, it's unlike anything in our databases. The swarm seems to corrupt matter itself. Their weapons pass right through normal shields. Standard military tactics don't work." The president was quiet for a long moment. "They want soldiers. They want our armies." "Yes, sir." "But, sir?" Sarah hesitated, then pushed forward. "I don't think soldiers are what they need." 2 days later, Sarah found herself aboard a hastily prepared diplomatic vessel, the UES Hermes, jumping through hyperspace toward coordinates that didn't exist on any human star chart. The journey took 18 hours, and when they dropped back into normal space, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Nexus Prime was massive. The space station was the size of a small moon, its surface covered in docking bays, communication arrays, and weapons platforms. Ships from dozens of different species moved in carefully controlled patterns around the station. Some looked like graceful birds, others like mechanical spiders, and a few resembled nothing Sarah could compare to anything on Earth. "Welcome to Nexus Prime," came a new voice over the communication system. "I am General Cathara of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet. We are grateful for Earth's response." The docking process was smooth, handled by automated systems far more advanced than anything Earth possessed. Sarah and her small diplomatic team were escorted through corridors that seemed designed for creatures much taller than humans. The gravity was lighter than Earth standard, and the air smelled of ozone and something floral. General Cathara met them in what was clearly a war room. She was tall, with blue-scaled skin and eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. Her uniform was covered in decorations that Sarah assumed were military honors. Behind her stood representatives from a dozen other species, all looking tired and desperate. "Commander Chen," Cathara said, her voice translated by a device at her throat. "Your timing is fortunate. We lost another system yesterday. The swarm grows stronger with each world it consumes." Sarah studied the tactical displays around the room. The red zones on the maps had grown since the original message. "General, we've reviewed your data. This enemy is unlike anything we've faced before." "Yes," said another alien, this one covered in what looked like living metal. "The Void Swarm exists partially outside normal space. Our weapons cannot harm them effectively. Our shields cannot stop them. They corrupt our technology, turn our own ships against us." Cathara gestured to a display showing the aftermath of a battle. Ships drifted dead in space, their hulls twisted into impossible shapes. "We have thrown everything at them. Our best fleets, our most advanced weapons, our finest commanders. Nothing works. We need new tactics, new approaches." Sarah took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. General, you've studied our military history. You know about our wars, our weapons, our strategies. Indeed, humans have been at war with each other for thousands of years. You understand conflict in ways we do not. Your species has produced great military leaders, disciplined armies, effective tactics. That's true, Sarah said slowly, but the enemy you're facing isn't one that responds to traditional warfare. You don't need our soldiers, General. You need something else. Kithra's glowing eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Sarah activated her own holographic display, showing personnel files from Earth's most classified military divisions. When humanity faces something that can't be fought with normal methods, we don't send soldiers. We send specialists. The alien commanders leaned forward as Sarah's presentation began. The files showed individuals who looked more like criminals than military personnel. Their service records were heavily classified, their methods unorthodox, their success rates impossibly high. This is Colonel Marcus Blackwood, Sarah said, highlighting a scarred man with cybernetic implants. He doesn't command armies. He leads small teams of specialists who handle threats too dangerous for normal military response. Another file appeared. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, biological warfare specialist. Elena Vasquez, cybernetic infiltration expert. Jackson Williams, demolitions and psychological warfare. The aliens looked confused. One of them, a creature that resembled a walking crystal formation, spoke up. These individuals appear to be irregular troops? They're not troops at all, Sarah said. They're hunters. When Earth faces something that threatens our existence, we don't send people who follow rules. We send people who make their own rules. General Kithara studied the files with growing concern. Commander, some of these service records indicate serious disciplinary issues. Court-martials, psychological evaluations marking them as potentially dangerous. Exactly, Sarah said. You're facing an enemy that exists outside normal reality. It corrupts everything it touches, turns order into chaos. You can't fight that with conventional forces. You need people who understand chaos, who can think like monsters. The room fell silent. Sarah could see the aliens processing this information, weighing their desperation against their discomfort with Earth's unconventional approach. Finally, Kithara spoke. These specialists of yours, can they truly succeed where our armies have failed? Sarah met her glowing gaze steadily. General, when something threatens humanity's survival, we don't ask if our methods are acceptable. We ask if they work. Colonel Blackwood and his team have never failed a mission. She paused, letting that sink in. But you should understand what you're asking for. You're not getting soldiers who will follow galactic warfare conventions. You're getting slayers who will do whatever it takes to eliminate the threat. The alien commanders exchanged glances, their various forms of communication, creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and electronic tones. Finally, Kithara nodded slowly. Very well, Commander Chen, send us your slayers. But understand that if they prove as dangerous as this void swarm, they won't, Sarah said firmly. They'll be worse, but they'll be on your side. 3 days later, the message went out to Earth, not a call for volunteers, not a mobilization of regular forces, but a single, coded transmission to a facility hidden deep in the Colorado mountains. The Slayer Corps was going to war. The ship that arrived at Nexus Prime 3 weeks later looked nothing like the diplomatic vessel that had brought Commander Chen. The UES Ragnarok was black as space itself, its hull covered in sensors and weapons that seemed to bend light around them. When it docked, no fanfare announced its arrival. The ship simply appeared in the bay like a predator materializing from shadow. General Kithara stood in the observation deck, watching the docking procedure with growing unease. The human ship moved with a precision that seemed almost alive, its systems adapting to the station's docking protocols without any apparent communication. It was like watching a snake coil itself into a comfortable position. General, her aide whispered, the human ship is not responding to standard hails. Perhaps their communication systems are different, Kithara replied, though she didn't believe it herself. The ship's silence felt deliberate, calculated. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss. What emerged was not what any of the assembled alien dignitaries expected. The man who stepped out first was tall and lean, his face marked by scars that told stories of violence survived. His left arm was clearly cybernetic, the metal and synthetic skin blending seamlessly with flesh. His eyes were the pale blue of winter ice, and when he looked at the welcoming committee, several aliens took an involuntary step backward. Colonel Marcus Blackwood, he said, his voice carrying easily across the docking bay. Slayer Corps. Behind him came 11 others, each more unsettling than the last. A small Asian woman whose fingers ended in what looked like data ports. A massive black man carrying equipment that was clearly explosive in nature. A thin blonde woman whose eyes never stopped moving, cataloging everything around her with predatory focus. General Kithara approached carefully. "Colonel Blackwood, welcome to Nexus Prime. I am General Kithara, Zephyrian Defense Fleet," Blackwood interrupted. "I read the briefing. You've got a void swarm problem, and conventional weapons aren't working." The casual way he cut off a high-ranking officer sent ripples of shock through the alien observers. In their cultures, such behavior would be grounds for immediate arrest. Kithara's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of agitation among her people. "Yes, Colonel. Perhaps we should begin with a full briefing." "No need." Blackwood gestured to his team. "We've got everything we need from Earth's analysis. The swarm exists partially outside normal spacetime, corrupts matter through quantum field manipulation, and turns your own technology against you. Standard energy weapons are useless because they don't exist fully in this dimension." He started walking toward the exit, his team falling in behind him like a pack of wolves. "We'll need lab space for Dr. Tanaka's work, access to your quantum field generators for Vasquez, and a clear zone for weapons testing. Williams needs to understand your current explosive technology so he can improve it." The aliens hurried to keep up. Kithara found herself in the strange position of following rather than leading. "Colonel, there are protocols." "Protocols are for people who have time," said the Asian woman, speaking for the first time. Her voice was flat, emotionless. "I am Dr. Yuki Tanaka. How many worlds has your protocol saved?" The question hit like a physical blow. Kithara's aide made a soft sound of distress. "Doctor, we have lost 19 systems to date." 23, corrected another member of Blackwood's team, a woman with short red hair and scars on her neck. "Your intelligence is 48 hours behind. I'm Elena Vasquez. I've been monitoring your communication since we entered this system." The casual admission that they had been spying on coalition communications sent another wave of shock through the assembled aliens. General Kithara stopped walking. "Ms. Vasquez, unauthorized access to military communications is necessary," Blackwood said simply. "You called us because your methods aren't working. Don't expect us to follow your methods." They reached the main conference room where tactical displays showed the current state of the war. The red zones had indeed expanded since the last briefing. Entire systems were going dark, their communications cutting off abruptly. Colonel Blackwood studied the displays for exactly 30 seconds. Then he turned to his team. "Tanaka analysis?" The doctor stepped forward, her data ports gleaming as she interfaced directly with the coalition's computers. Several aliens gasped at the sight. Direct neural interfaces were considered extremely dangerous by most galactic species. "Biological component confirmed," Tanaka said after a moment. "The swarm isn't just technology. It's a hybrid entity, part organic, part quantum field manipulation. The organic component is what allows it to corrupt other systems. It spreads like a virus. Vasquez?" Elena's fingers danced over a holographic keyboard that materialized from her cybernetic implants. "Their quantum signatures are unstable. The swarm exists in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. That's why energy weapons don't work. You can't hit something that's only partially here." Jackson Williams, the demolitions expert, was examining the weapon specifications on another display. He shook his head in disgust. "Your explosives are designed for conventional matter. You need dimensional disruptors, quantum destabilizers, weapons that can hit targets across multiple reality states." General Kithara found her voice. "Mr. Williams, such weapons would be extremely dangerous to develop. The energy requirements alone would be massive," Williams agreed cheerfully. "Probably kill anyone within a kilometer radius if they malfunction. Want to see my preliminary designs?" Before anyone could answer, Williams projected his modifications onto the main display. The assembled alien commanders stared in horror at weapons that seemed designed to tear holes in reality itself. "These designs are insane," whispered the crystalline being. "You would risk destroying entire star systems." "Better than letting the swarm do it for us," said another team member, a pale man with tattoos that seemed to move on his skin. "I'm David Kane, psychological warfare specialist. I've been analyzing the swarm's behavioral patterns." He gestured to the tactical displays. "It's not random. The swarm is intelligent and it's learning from each encounter. It adapts faster than you can develop new tactics. You need to think like it does. And how does it think? Cathara asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Kane's smile was deeply unsettling. Like a predator. Like something that enjoys causing fear. It doesn't just want to win. It wants to make you suffer while it destroys you. The room fell silent. Finally, one of the alien commanders spoke up. Mr. Kane, you speak as if you understand such thinking. I do, Kane replied simply. That's why I'm here. Colonel Blackwood watched the exchange with approval. His team was doing exactly what they needed to do, making the aliens understand what they were really dealing with. General Kithara, he said, your people are good soldiers. Disciplined, honorable, professional, but you're fighting an enemy that doesn't care about honor or rules. It's chaos given form, and chaos can only be fought with controlled chaos. He gestured to his team. Each of these people has something broken inside them, something that makes them think like monsters. In any civilized society, they would be locked up or heavily medicated. But when civilization faces something that wants to end it, you don't send the civilized. Cathara's scales were now shifting through a rapid spectrum of colors, indicating extreme agitation. Colonel, what you're describing sounds like we're as dangerous as the thing we're fighting, Blackwood finished. We are. The only difference is that we're pointed in the right direction. He turned to face the tactical display showing the latest swarm incursion. There's an active infestation in the Kepler system. 3 inhabited worlds, approximately 2 billion civilians. Your conventional forces have been trying to contain it for 6 days with no success. Blackwood looked back at the assembled aliens. We'll take care of it. But when we're done, you'll understand exactly what you've asked Earth to send you. Dr. Tanaka was already packing her equipment. Estimated time to deployment? 6 hours, Blackwood replied. Long enough to load our specialized gear and plot a course. Williams, how long do you need to modify their torpedo warheads? Give me 4 hours and access to their weapons bay. I'll have something that can hurt the swarm. As the Slayers began their preparations, General Kithara watched them work with growing dread. She had asked for soldiers to save her people. Instead, she had invited something far more dangerous aboard her station. But as the latest reports from Kepler came in, another world going silent, another billion lives lost, she began to understand that sometimes salvation came in forms too terrible to contemplate. The monsters were on their side now. She could only hope that would be enough. The Kepler system looked like a wound in space. Where 3 blue-green worlds had once orbited their star, now only twisted shadows remained. The planets were still there, but wrong somehow, as if reality itself had been infected with cancer. Colonel Blackwood stood on the bridge of the Ragnarok, watching the sensor readings with cold satisfaction. There it is, he said softly. The void swarm in its natural habitat. General Kithara, who had insisted on accompanying the mission, despite Blackwood's objections, stared at the displays in horror. The planets. What has it done to them? Corrupted them, replied Elena Vasquez, her cybernetic fingers dancing over her control interface. The quantum signatures are completely wrong. The swarm isn't just consuming the matter. It's rewriting the fundamental laws of physics in localized areas. Dr. Tanaka looked up from her biological scanners, her face grim. 2 billion life signs, but they're not human anymore. The organic component of the swarm has infected the entire population. They're still alive, but they're no longer themselves. Jackson Williams was studying the tactical display with professional interest. The swarms built defensive positions around all 3 worlds, some kind of reality anchor points that let them exist more fully in our dimension. Take those out, and the whole infestation becomes vulnerable. David Kane laughed, a sound that made several coalition officers step away from him. It's beautiful in a way. The swarm isn't just conquering these worlds, it's making them into breeding grounds for more swarm entities. Psychological warfare on a planetary scale. Kithra's scales shifted to deep purple, a color that indicated nausea among her species. Mr. Kane, those are civilian populations you're discussing. Not anymore, they're not, Kane replied cheerfully. They're weapons now. The swarm will use their memories, their knowledge, their fears against us. It's brilliant, really. Colonel Blackwood cut off the discussion with a gesture. Enough analysis. Time for action. Williams, are your modifications ready? Better than ready. Williams grinned, patting a missile casing that hummed with barely contained energy. These beauties will punch holes in whatever dimension the swarm is hiding in. Just don't get too close when they detonate. The quantum backwash will liquefy anything organic within 50 kilometers. And if we miss? Asked one of the Coalition tactical officers. Williams's grin widened. Then we accidentally crack the planet in half. But hey, it's better than letting the swarm keep it. The casual discussion of planetary destruction sent waves of shock through the Coalition personnel. General Cathara stepped forward. Colonel, surely there must be a way to save the civilian populations. There isn't, Dr. Tanaka said flatly, not looking up from her instruments. I've analyzed the infection vectors. The organic component has completely rewritten their neural patterns. They're not the same people anymore. They're extensions of the swarm's consciousness. Elena Vasquez nodded in agreement. I'm picking up coordinated thought patterns across all 3 worlds. 2 billion minds all thinking the same thoughts, all serving the same purpose. From a cybernetic standpoint, it's actually quite elegant. Cathara's aide made a soft keening sound of distress. This is monstrous. How can you speak of such horror so calmly? Blackwood turned to face the alien officers. Because getting emotional about it won't help anyone. The people on those worlds are already dead. They just haven't stopped moving yet. Our job is to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. He gestured to the tactical display. The swarm expects you to hesitate, to try to save what can't be saved. That's how it's beaten your forces so many times. You waste time and resources on rescue operations while it spreads to new targets. The main screen suddenly flickered, and a new image appeared. It was a human face, but wrong in every possible way. The features were familiar, someone's father, brother, son, but the eyes held an intelligence that was distinctly alien. Welcome, the thing said, its voice a harmony of frequencies that hurt to hear. We have been expecting Earth's champions. We know what you are. David Kane clapped his hands together in delight. Oh, this is good. It's using psychological profiles of the infected population to create a composite image designed to provoke maximum emotional response. Look at the facial structure. It's averaged from approximately 10,000 human faces to create the perfect everyman appearance. The swarm entity's smile widened beyond what human anatomy should allow. You think you understand us, little predator. But we have consumed civilizations that span millions of years. We have absorbed the knowledge and memories of countless species. What can your small minds comprehend that we have not already learned? Blackwood stepped forward, his expression unchanged. Probably nothing. But here's the thing about Earth. We don't need to understand something to kill it. The entity laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Kill us. You cannot kill what exists beyond your narrow dimension. You cannot fight what you cannot touch. Watch us, Blackwood said simply. The attack began without warning. The Ragnarok unleashed Williams' modified weapons at the reality, anchor points, each missile tearing holes in space-time itself. The swarm entities shrieked as their dimensional stability collapsed, forcing them fully into normal space where conventional weapons could finally reach them. But the Slayers weren't using conventional weapons. Dr. Tanaka's bioweapons spread through the swarm's organic network like wildfire, targeting the specific quantum frequencies that allowed the entities to exist across multiple dimensions. Elena Vasquez hacked directly into the swarm's collective consciousness, introducing viruses that turned their own enhanced perceptions against them. The battle was unlike anything the Coalition forces had ever witnessed. The humans fought with a creativity that bordered on madness, adapting their tactics moment by moment as the swarm tried to counter their assault. When the swarm attempted to corrupt the Ragnarok systems, Vasquez laughed and opened her ship's computers completely to the attack. Come on, she whispered, her data ports glowing white-hot. Let me show you what human malware looks like. The swarm entities that tried to invade the ship's network found themselves trapped in a maze of recursive code that Vasquez had designed based on human psychological torture techniques. They emerged from the experience damaged and disoriented, their collective consciousness fractured. Jackson Williams deployed weapons that shouldn't have been possible to build, devices that turned the swarm's own reality-bending abilities against them. When they tried to phase out of normal space, They found themselves caught in quantum traps that held them in place while conventional explosives tore them apart. David Kane's contribution was perhaps the most disturbing. He studied the swarm's psychological warfare techniques for exactly 17 minutes, then began broadcasting modified versions back at them. The entities that had terrorized entire civilizations suddenly found themselves experiencing fear for the first time in their existence. "You like getting inside people's heads?" Kane asked over the communication channel, his voice filled with genuine pleasure. "Let me show you what's inside mine." The psychological assault that followed was so intense that several coalition officers had to be sedated. Kane turned the swarm's own tactics against them, but amplified through a mind that understood cruelty in ways the ancient entities had never encountered. Within 6 hours, the infection of the Kepler system was completely eliminated. The 3 worlds were lifeless rocks now, their corrupted matter broken down to component atoms by weapons that violated several fundamental laws of physics. As the Ragnarok prepared to return to Nexus Prime, General Cathara sat in her quarters, staring at the mission reports. The Slayers had succeeded completely. The threat that had destroyed 19 coalition worlds had been eliminated in less than a day. But the methods they had used, the casual way they had destroyed entire planets, the obvious enjoyment some of them had taken in the violence, it all painted a picture that terrified her more than the Void Swarm ever had. Colonel Blackwood found her there an hour later. "General, you look troubled." Kethra looked up at him, her eyes dim with exhaustion. "Colonel, what you did today, it worked. But at what cost? The weapons you used, the tactics you employed, they're as monstrous as anything the swarm has done." Blackwood nodded slowly. "Yes, they are. The difference is that when this war is over, we'll go home and lock ourselves away again. The swarm would have kept spreading forever." He moved to the window, looking out at the empty space where 3 worlds had once been. "You asked for Earth's help because you were desperate. But desperation has a price, General. Sometimes the only way to stop a monster is to become something worse." Cathara felt something cold settle in her chest. "And what happens when there are no more monsters to fight?" Blackwood's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Then you'd better hope you can trust us to remember which side we're on." The victory at Kepler should have been a celebration. Instead, the Coalition Council meeting 3 days later felt more like a trial. General Cathara sat at the curved table with representatives from 12 species, all of them looking at the human delegation with barely concealed fear. Colonel Blackwood stood at the center of the chamber, his team arranged behind him like a pack of predators. The holographic displays around them showed the aftermath of their assault on the swarm, 3 dead worlds and a clear zone of space where nothing lived anymore. "The operation was a complete success," Cathara reported, though her voice lacked any joy. "The Void Swarm presence in the Kepler system has been entirely eliminated." Counselor Vex, the crystalline being who led the Altarian delegation, spoke first. "At the cost of 3 inhabited worlds and 2 billion civilian lives." "They were already dead," Dr. Tanaka said flatly. "The swarm had corrupted their biological systems beyond any possibility of recovery. We simply prevented their suffering from continuing." "And who made that decision?" demanded Counselor Jung, her insect-like features clicking with agitation. "Who gave you the right to determine that entire populations were beyond saving?" Elena Vasquez looked up from the datapad she had been studying. "I did, after analyzing their neural patterns for exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. The infection was complete. Attempting rescue would have resulted in the swarm spreading to our ships. The casual way she dismissed 2 billion lives sent a ripple of shock through the assembled delegates. Counselor Vex's crystal form began to glow with what his species considered righteous anger. "Ms. Vasquez, that decision should have been made by the Coalition command structure, not by a single individual, who would have spent 3 days debating, while the swarm prepared its next attack," Jackson Williams interrupted. "How many more worlds would have been lost while you held committee meetings?" David Kane laughed softly. "They still don't understand. You brought us here to fight monsters, but you expect us to fill out paperwork first." General Cathara raised a hand for silence. "The concern is not about the effectiveness of your methods, but about their Implications. The weapons you used in the Kepler system. Our scientists have been analyzing the data. They violate 17 different galactic warfare conventions. Good, said Blackwood simply. Warfare conventions exist to limit damage between civilized opponents. The Void Swarm isn't civilized. Counselor Thrain, a being that resembled a metallic tree, spoke in harmonics that the translation system rendered as deep concern. Colonel Blackwood, the quantum disruption weapons your team deployed could theoretically be used against any target. The technology to crack planetary cores should not exist. Williams grinned. But it does exist, and now you know it works. Feel safer? The question hung in the air like a threat. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The humans had just demonstrated that they possessed weapons capable of destroying entire worlds, and they seemed entirely comfortable with that fact. Kythera activated a new set of displays. There have been other concerns raised about your team's methods. The psychological warfare techniques used by Mr. Kane caused permanent trauma to 3 coalition officers who monitored the communications. Kane shrugged. I warned them not to listen. Human psychological warfare is designed to break human minds, which are considerably more resilient than most species represented here. And that doesn't concern you? Asked Counselor Vex. Not particularly, Kane replied. Would you prefer I had used methods that didn't work? The swarm was using psychological attacks that had crippled your forces for months. I simply responded in kind, but better. Dr. Tanaka looked up from her tablet. If we're discussing concerns about our methods, perhaps the Council would like to explain why 17 of the 23 worlds lost to the swarm contained coalition research facilities working on dimensional manipulation technology. The chamber fell silent. Several delegates exchanged glances that the humans couldn't interpret, but the sudden tension was unmistakable. Dr. Tanaka, Kythera said carefully, those facilities were classified. Were classified, Elena Vasquez corrected. I've downloaded all their research data. Fascinating work. Attempts to open stable portals to parallel dimensions, experiments with quantum consciousness transfer, research into weaponizing dimensional instabilities. Blackwood stepped forward, his pale eyes fixed on the council members. You want to talk about dangerous weapons? Let's talk about what you were building before the swarm showed up. Counselor Thrain's metallic form dimmed. That research was conducted under strict safety protocols. Protocols that failed, Dr. Tanaka said flatly. The dimensional breach that allowed the swarm into this reality was caused by an experiment at the Proxima facility. Your people opened a door they couldn't close. The accusation hit the chamber like a physical blow. General, Kythera's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a pale blue that indicated shock. That's impossible, she whispered. The swarm came from outside our galaxy. No, Vasquez said, her cybernetic interfaces glowing as she projected new data. It came from outside your dimension, but the breach point was definitely the Proxima facility. The quantum signatures are identical. Williams whistled appreciatively. So you folks didn't just call us in to clean up a mess. You called us in to clean up your mess. Makes sense why conventional weapons weren't working. You were fighting something you accidentally created. The council chamber erupted in voices, delegates arguing in a dozen different languages. Some demanded proof, others wanted to know why this information had been withheld, and a few began making accusations about cover-ups and criminal negligence. Blackwood let the chaos continue for exactly 60 seconds, then spoke a single word. Enough. His voice cut through the noise like a blade. The delegates fell silent, suddenly reminded that they were in the presence of beings who had just demonstrated their ability to destroy worlds. The how and why don't matter now, Blackwood continued. What matters is that the swarm exists, it's spreading, and we're the only ones who figured out how to stop it. Counselor Vex's crystal form flickered with agitation. Colonel, surely you understand our concern. Your methods, while effective, are terrifying, Blackwood finished. Yes, they are. They're supposed to be. We're not here to make you comfortable. We're here to save your civilization. He gestured to his team. Each of these people volunteered for this mission knowing they might not come back. Not because they're heroes, but because they understand what's at stake. When existence itself is threatened, you don't send people who play by the rules. Dr. Tanaka stood up, her expression colder than vacuum. The swarm has consumed 23 worlds so far. At its current rate of expansion, it will reach the galactic core within 18 months. Your combined fleets can't stop it. Your weapons can't hurt it. Your strategies don't work. She paused, letting that sink in. We can stop it, but only if you let us do what we're trained to do. And what exactly are you trained to do? Asked Counselor Jung. David Kane's smile was deeply unsettling. Whatever it takes. The simple answer contained more threat than any elaborate warning could have. The council delegates sat in uncomfortable silence, weighing their fear of the humans against their terror of the void swarm. Finally, General Cathara spoke. What do you need from us? Access to all coalition military assets, Blackwood replied immediately. Complete operational authority in swarm-controlled space. No oversight, no second-guessing, no committees. That's asking for a blank check to wage war however you see fit, Counselor Vex protested. Yes, it is, Blackwood agreed. Because that's the only way this works. You either trust us completely, or you fight the swarm yourselves. He turned to face the full council. But understand this. If you choose to continue fighting conventionally, you will lose. The swarm will consume every world in this galaxy, and then it will spread to others, including Earth. The threat was implicit but clear. Earth had sent its monsters to save the galaxy. But if the galaxy chose not to be saved, those same monsters would return home and let it burn. General Kithera looked around the chamber at her fellow council members. The fear in their eyes wasn't just about the void swarm anymore. It was about the realization that salvation had come in a form too terrible to trust, but too necessary to refuse. Very well, she said finally. Colonel Blackwood, the Coalition grants you full operational authority. Blackwood nodded once. Then let's finish this war. As the Slayers filed out of the chamber, Counselor Vex turned to Kithera. What have we done? Kithera watched the humans disappear down the corridor, her scales shifting to the deep gray of resignation. We've made a deal with devils. Let's hope they keep their word about which side they're on. The final battle began in a place that shouldn't exist. Deep in the galactic core, where space itself was twisted into impossible geometries, the void swarm had built its heart. It was a massive structure that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, feeding on the quantum foam that separated realities. From here, it had sent its tendrils across the galaxy, consuming worlds and civilizations for food. Colonel Blackwood stood on the bridge of the Ragnarok, staring at sensor readings that made no sense to human eyes. After 6 months of hunting the swarm across dozens of star systems, they had finally traced it back to its source. It's beautiful, whispered Elena Vasquez, her cybernetic implants glowing as she interfaced with the ship's quantum sensors. Look at those dimensional folds. It's like a flower made of broken space-time. Dr. Tanaka was less poetic in her assessment. It's a cancer, a tumor in the structure of reality itself. The longer it exists, the more it destabilizes local space. Jackson Williams studied the tactical displays with professional appreciation. The whole thing is one giant weapons platform. Those dimensional spikes aren't just structural, they're focusing arrays for reality manipulation weapons. David Kane laughed softly, a sound that had come to terrify Coalition personnel over the months of their campaign. It's afraid of us. Look at those defensive positions. The swarm has never bothered with serious fortifications before. It's learning to fear. General Kithera, who had insisted on joining the final assault despite Blackwood's objections, studied the readings with growing horror. Colonel, that structure is larger than most star systems. How can we possibly assault something of that magnitude? Blackwood turned from the displays, his pale eyes reflecting the strange light of the dimensional anomaly ahead. We don't assault it, General. We go inside it. The plan was insane by any conventional standard. Rather than attacking the swarm's fortress from outside, the Slayers intended to punch through the dimensional barriers and enter the structure directly. Once inside, they would plant. Williams specially designed quantum charges at key structural points and collapsed the entire complex into a single dimension where it could be destroyed. With the energy release will be visible from the next galaxy, Williams said cheerfully as he made final adjustments to his devices. It should also create a dimensional shockwave that will sever the swarm's connection to all its outlying infestations. And if something goes wrong? Asked Kithura. Then we create a black hole about the size of Sol and end the universe in this sector, Williams replied with disturbing casualness. But hey, at least the swarm goes with us. The coalition fleet had assembled at a safe distance, nearly a light year away from the target zone. They watched as the Ragnarok began its approach, its hull glowing with dimensional stress as it passed through layers of twisted space. Inside the ship, the Slayers made their final preparations. Each of them had volunteered for what everyone understood to be a suicide mission. The dimensional barriers around the swarm's heart were too unstable to allow for retreat once they were breached. Any regrets? Blackwood asked his team as they suited up in armor designed to survive in spaces where the laws of physics were optional. Just one, replied Kane, checking his psychological warfare equipment. I wish I could see the look on the swarm's collective face when it realizes what we really are. Elena Vasquez's cybernetic implants were running hot as she prepared for the deepest intrusion she had ever attempted. The swarm thinks it understands human psychology because it absorbed some of our people. It has no idea what Earth keeps locked away in the deep vaults. Dr. Tanaka was loading bioweapons that should not have existed, viruses designed to attack the quantum structures that held matter together. The irony is perfect. They wanted to consume our reality, so we're going to give them a taste of what lies beneath it. The Ragnarok punched through the first-dimensional barrier with a sound like reality screaming. The ship's hull began to shift and flow as local physics became negotiable. Through the viewports they could see impossible vistas. Galaxies folded into geometric patterns. Stars that burned with colors that had no names. Welcome, came a voice that spoke directly into their minds without using sound. It was the collective consciousness of the Void Swarm, vast and alien and utterly confident. You have come far to die, little destroyers. Blackwood activated the ship's communication system. We haven't come to die. We've come to show you what death looks like. The attack began immediately. The swarm threw everything it had at the small human ship. Reality-warping weapons, dimensional predators, attacks that tried to erase the Slayers from existence retroactively. But the humans had prepared for this. Elena Vasquez opened her consciousness completely to the swarm's assault, letting it pour into her cybernetic systems. Come on, she whispered, blood running from her eyes as the neural interfaces overloaded. Let me show you what's really inside a human mind. What the swarm found there was not what it expected. Instead of the ordered thoughts of a civilized being, it encountered something far more primitive and dangerous. Vasquez had opened pathways to the deepest parts of human consciousness. The parts that remembered when humanity's ancestors were apex predators who hunted megafauna across frozen continents, the swarm entities that tried to invade. Her mind found themselves face to face with something that had evolved to kill without mercy or hesitation. They retreated in shock, their collective consciousness fractured by contact with predatory instincts that predated civilization. Dr. Tanaka released her bioweapons into the structure's organic components. But these weren't conventional viruses. They were based on something she had discovered in Earth's deepest archives, the genetic memory of humanity's own encounter with dimensional parasites during the species' early evolution. The swarm had consumed many civilizations, but it had never encountered a species that had survived a similar attack and developed immunity. Tanaka's weapons turned the swarm's own adaptive abilities against it, causing it to evolve rapidly in directions that led to its own destruction. Jackson Williams had reached the structure's core, where the dimensional anchors maintained the fortress's stability across multiple realities. He placed his charges with the careful precision of an artist, each device designed to create a cascade failure that would collapse the entire complex. 30 seconds, he announced over the communication system. Time to go home. But there was no going home. The dimensional barriers had sealed behind them, trapping the Ragnarok inside the collapsing structure. The Slayers had always known this would be a one-way trip. David Kane was the last to speak, his voice filled with an emotion none of them had heard from him before. Satisfaction. The swarm wanted to understand fear, he said. I hope it's learning. The charges detonated simultaneously, creating a chain reaction that tore through 17 dimensions at once. The Void Swarm's fortress collapsed in on itself, its massive structure compressed into a single point of space-time that immediately began consuming everything around it. The energy release was indeed visible from the next galaxy. More importantly, the dimensional shockwave severed every connection the swarm had to the infestations it had spread across Coalition space. Cut off from their source, the remaining swarm entities withered and died within hours. General Cathara stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the expanding energy wave from a safe distance. Her scales had turned silver, the color her species displayed in the presence of the sublime and terrible. It's over, reported her communications officer. All swarm activity has ceased across the galaxy. Kithra nodded slowly. The threat that had consumed 23 worlds and killed trillions was finally ended. But the cost, General, her aide said quietly. The Coalition Council is asking about the human team. Are there any survivors? Kithra looked at the expanding sphere of destruction where the swarm's heart had been. Nothing could survive that level of dimensional disruption. The Slayers had known it when they made their final approach. No, she said finally. They're gone. But even as she spoke, she wondered if that was entirely true. The humans had shown abilities that defied understanding, had survived things that should have killed them. Part of her hoped they had found some impossible way to escape. Another part hoped they hadn't. 3 months later, Earth received a detailed report on the Slayer Corps' final mission. The 12 volunteers who had saved the galaxy were listed as missing in action, their fate unknown. But those who knew better understood the truth. Commander Sarah Chen read the classified files in her office, her coffee growing cold as she absorbed the details of what her people had done in the galaxy's name. The Slayers had succeeded beyond all expectations, but at a cost that made her question whether humanity deserved the salvation they had purchased. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Chen looked up to see a priority transmission from the deepest vaults beneath Cheyenne Mountain. The message was brief. Recruitment for Slayer Corps Mark II authorized. Threat assessment indicates 73% probability of future extra-dimensional incursion within 50 years. Chen set down the message and looked out her window at the peaceful Earth sky. Somewhere out there, new threats were stirring, new challenges that would require humanity to send its monsters into the dark once again.